Hi everyone. We are continuing our series on really just me sharing about the lives of the saints. I love the saints. I love their stories. The saints and their stories are such a gift from God because they help to show us how we, normal, ordinary people who are trying to live faithfully and journey to heaven, we can follow the examples of those that have successfully made that journey before us. So I always find the saints so inspirational and appreciate so much their lives and their prayers. So today I wanted to share about one of my favorite saints. I think I've said that in every video so far. They're all my favorites. But Saint Damien De Veau, or Damian of Molokai, you may know him. A great saint and an American saint here in the Americas. And relatively recent. He died in the early 1900s. So Damien was his religious name. He was born Joseph in Belgium. To a large family, and at a young age he had a desire to become a priest, and he had a desire to become a foreign missionary, so he entered seminary. Two of his older sisters were religious sisters, and his brother joined a missionary congregation, and so Joseph followed his older brother's footsteps, heard the call, and joined that same congregation. He went through his studies, and Damien, well, he chose the religious name Damien. His older brother was selected to go to the missions, to serve in one of the new missions in the kingdom of Hawaii. And unfortunately, because of ill health, the brother couldn't make the journey. And so Damien chose to take his brother's place. So his brother remained back in Belgium, and Damien made the journey to the United States, across the United States, and then out to the Hawaiian Islands. To go and serve in Hawaii. So the first number of years he was in Hawaii, and he was serving on the main island. In the community, just served at the parish. But there was an outbreak of leprosy on the islands. And the government, the Hawaiian government, since they didn't know how to treat it, they started creating leper colonies on some of the kind of outlying islands. One of the islands being set aside as a leper colony was Molokai. The bishop that was in charge of the Hawaiian Islands was also in charge of pastoral care of the lepers, but there were no priests that wanted to go out because they knew, and the bishop knew, to send a priest out to a leper colony was to sentence them basically to death. Because once they go to the colony, because they didn't know enough about the disease, and it was feared to be far more contagious than it actually was, but it was still a contagious disease, any priest that was sent out there would never be able to return to the mainland or to his family, and would have to serve in the mission until death. And so the bishop put out a call, is there anyone that would be willing to go to Molokai Island? And he basically just asked. He didn't want to send anyone that didn't want to go. And Damien, who had only by chance, right, he wasn't the one that was selected to go to Hawaii. His brother just couldn't go, so he opted to go. Another call went out. We need someone to go to Molokai. You are going to serve there until your death. And Damien volunteered. And so he was sent. He was the only priest that served on the island. They had originally hoped that more priests would respond, but only Damien went. And when he arrived in Molokai, it was... in his words, it was such an experience of darkness. Because the people were ripped away from their families and isolated from society and put among other strangers that had this disease, there was incredible despair. All of them knew that they were going to die. They knew they had been abandoned by everyone. They didn't have much to live for. So in order to kind of deal with their darkness, there was a lot of drinking. There was a lot of abuse of many different forms. There was a lot of sin and despair, terrible behavior, people mistreating each other. There weren't any hospitals or schools, because why go to a hospital if you're just going to die anyway? Why send doctors? Why send schools? What's the point of learning how to read? You're going to die anyway. So there was really nothing. There was no community. There was no society. There wasn't any hope. So Damien came into this darkness. He was a foreigner. And he set about doing the work of Christ, which was just bringing hope. And so he did that by encouraging people to live holy lives. He started celebrating Mass and preaching the gospel and offering religious education. But he also brought many of the skills that he had learned as a child back in Belgium. So rudimentary medicine, farming techniques. He established schools for boys, girls, adult education. He established the first hospital and infirmary, started taking care of the elderly. And as a priest, he made it his personal goal to be in the presence of and praying for every person on the island who died. So he stood when the person began the process of death and attended to them. He built the coffins, dug the graves, and then would do a period of time of prayer for the dead with any members of their family who happened to be on the island. And Damien did this for years alone. Eventually other missionary congregations came. Another saint, actually, St. Mary Ann Cope, an American. She eventually came with a group of sisters. But for much of his time, aided by others on the island, Saint Damien, or Father Damien, served the lepers of Molokai. And in fact, he did contract leprosy. We call it Hansen's disease. The way that he found out about Hansen's disease, it affects your nerve tissue and then kind of corrodes. So he was getting ready to bathe one day and stepped into a pot of hot water, but didn't feel it. And so it was a sign, because his nerve endings were starting to be damaged. He couldn't feel the heat, and that was the day that he knew that he had contracted the disease. Just so you know the humility, priests, we go to confession. I always think about this. A lot of times put priests up on pedestals. They think that we're sinless, but priests, we go to confession too. Damien was only able to go to confession on a very infrequent basis because priests wouldn't come to the island. So in order for him to go to confession, a priest would row out from the main island and meet him in the bay. Damien would row out, and especially as he got sicker, he didn't have the energy to go out. So he had two people that would journey with him, and there would be the priests in the other boat, and they would have the people that would have rowed them out. So Damien would be in the presence of a priest who could hear his confession, but also in the presence of a whole community. He would have to make his confession in public. Imagine having to do that. But his great love for God and his great humility was, he knew that it was more important to have the mercy of God than the respect of others. But because he valued God's mercy so much, received it and then lived it, he gained the respect of others, and was known during his life for all of the great things that he'd done, but his humility and his tireless work for those who were most in need, to be a great saint. He was often heard telling the people on the island, the world sees you as but a leper, but in the eyes of God you are more precious than anything. So Damien ultimately succumbed to the disease, and then he was called home to God. So a beautiful story. He's from Hawaii, so he's originally from Belgium, but he's Hawaiian, and he's been adopted as an honorary American and Hawaiian, so he is an American saint. And I think so many things can be learned from his life, but the first being just a great love for God, in such a way that by spending more time in prayer and close to the Eucharist, his eyes were trained to see God, so that when he left the church, he was able to see God present in others. I guess the way that he would put it would be, he trained his eyes to see Jesus under the disguise of the Eucharist, and because he was able to see him there, it wasn't so hard to see Jesus disguised in the distressing outfit of someone with leprosy. So he didn't mind going and being with Jesus in the poor, because he knew that the person that he was encountering really was a child of God. And all of us need eyes like that, to be close to Jesus in the Eucharist, to train our eyes to see him there, so that we're better able to see him in everyone that we encounter. And then the second thing is just the radical desire to be sent, right? He was not the first person chosen for any of the missions that he was sent on, but he volunteered himself, right? He said, I will go, Lord. There's a need, and I want to go. And I think so many of us encounter needs. They're not necessarily big needs like someone needs to go to a leper colony, but there are people in need in our families. There are people and obligations that need to be fulfilled in our workplaces, in our schools. And we often sit there and wonder, well, I wish someone would do this. I wish someone would bring Christ's love into this situation, Christ's mercy, Christ's healing. And the Lord's saying, I want you to do it, right? Damien said he heard the call. There was someone that needed to go to the Hawaiian Islands. There's someone that needed to go to Molokai. Lord, send me, right? And all of us need to have that heart to be able to say, Lord, if there's a need and I recognize the need, send me to address it. Don't send someone else. Send me. I want to go. And so we ask for Saint Damian's powerful intercession, and I hope that his story and his prayers inspire you to be great saints. God bless you.